ahead and get started. Again, this is Cynthia. My name is Daphne. We've got some technical issues that Molly's helping us resolve, but we'll go ahead and get started anyway as they sort of figure it out. But most of you have been here before, and just to sort of reset, we are working through the longevity book, and we are on chapter 4 this week. So last week, I unfortunately was traveling, so couldn't join you, but I understand that there was a really great discussion about mTOR and insulin and some of the other nutrient pathways that dictate how our body responds to protein, glucose, et cetera. So today, chapter 4 is really delving into how does protein affect that. So what we're going to do is spend some time taking a look at what the book says. I'd like to kind of hear what you guys thought after reading it. I found it interesting because so much of what I see in the news, in programs that I watch, Instagram posts, etc., there's so much focus on eating more and more protein. Yet what we just read in chapter 4 is that we really need to think about what the right amount of protein is. And there's a potential that eating too much of it is actually just as bad as having too much glucose in our system. So I think it's worthwhile to dig into it a little bit to figure out what does that mean for us and how do we interpret what we're hearing all around us every day about getting more and more protein, and how do we figure out what's going to be best for us individually. So with that in mind...
Does everybody have a handout, first of all? Yeah, there's... I've lost my voice. I talk too much, probably, but I worked all weekend, and as a result, if I talk a lot, I'll cough. So please forgive my mask and my scratchy voice. So the handout, this is going to be a little different. My mother Barbara is 94 years old, and I gave her this book to read, and after she had a mild heart attack about 3 weeks ago, she told me she read the whole book, which I was so surprised. My mom's very smart, and her advice to me was that, her comment first of all was, I feel like I graduated from medical school. After she read it, she loved it, and so I was belly aching, as we call it. My father had great ways of saying things. I was belly aching about the fact that it was hard to teach this because I don't have the technical background to know the material, the words and whatnot. And she said, well, heaven's sake, Cynthia, just do what I always did. She was a teacher. I said, what was that, Mom? And she said, use the Socratic method. And I said, remind me what that is. And she said, you just keep pelting your students with questions like you know the answers and have them tell you what they know about it. So she asked me this morning when I called her if I wanted her questions. And I said, yeah, sure, Mom. The questions you're going to get today are not the questions my mom had because they were just not appropriate for this discussion. Not inappropriate in any way, but they were convoluted. And if you know me well now, you know I talk in circles, and I got that from my mom. So she's a big storyteller and loves to talk. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through this material. We're going to do 3 different things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask you some of these questions that are on. And I'm going to leave it to Daphne to decide which one she'd like to ask. And then in 15 or so minutes, we're going to break into several groups, maybe 3, and you're going to come up with the answers to the questions to the extent you can. And we probably concentrate at that point on the critical thinking, because like we all know from being in school ourselves, that means you are able to synthesize some of that knowledge you read. The other side is the upcoming events. Some of these did not make it into the newsletter. If you notice the timestamp, you'll notice that it was due out to the 15th today, but since book club was today, I tried to get it out yesterday. I sent it at 11:15 last night, and my trusty proofreader had already gone to bed. I missed 2 of the events that are on here. So if you've read the newsletter, there was no discussion or no copy in the newsletter about the July 20th. In fact, every Friday in the month, lunch and learn. That was left off, and sadly, my other favorite thing was Tashar's Tai Chi classes. And I'm going to make a few corrections to this while I've got your attention. Starting with the first one, it's true, we're here tonight, July 16th. That's fine. When we get to Friday, July 20th, it's a noon lunch and learn with Julie. The name of her project is the Earth Paint Project, and registrations required in that class is full. So I should have not even mentioned the afternoon session, but the noon session, you can come to the lunch and learn. Those are always open to the public whenever we have them. You bring a lunch or not. We provide beverages. We have a speaker. Last week we had a gentleman who published a book about his dying father. Many of you know him, Richard Balaban. It was fabulous. We had 28 people or so that attended. It was great. And then there's one other correction too. Comment, not correction. With regard to the Tai Chi classes, they're every Monday and Friday at 9:45 a.m. at Switchyard Park. Right now, that leader, Yell, is away with a family member who's ill. And Tashara, our sweet Tashara, who couldn't be here tonight, is taking over. So they're still holding the Tai Chi classes, but for the time being, it's at Tashara's house. So if you want to come to Tai Chi, it's awesome. You just need, I've put her email address here. Just contact her and find out where they are. She's agreed to take your questions with that. And let's see, what else do I need to tell you about? The Delicious Salads Workshop. The Delicious Salads Workshop is not on June 30th. Please cross out it. It's in fact on the 19th. Big difference. So if you want to see Vicki Blesda, one of our BZIers at the Bloomington Farm Stop Collective, please go on the 19th. And there is a registration link included.
July 19th or June?
Did I say July?
Well, no, I'm asking.
But that's the point. It's on there completely wrong. It's Monday, June 19th. Monday, June 19th. Yeah, we have two different, it is in June. So, do I have this in, no, I got them backwards. I see the, okay, so here's the deal. The first one is, as you just pointed out, I've got July 16th being tonight. It's not, right? It's June. This is what happens when I don't have things proofread. Friday, July 20th, that's correct, with the exception of the fact that you can't register anymore for the paint workshop. Is full and it's been underway. Then we get to Monday, and that is not, that class does happen every Monday and Friday, but the next Monday on the calendar, is the 23rd, not the 30th, right? There's one, in other words, I should have started with Monday, June 23rd. And every Monday and Friday after that. Yeah. And Vicki Bledsoe's, that is not a Monday, but it's June 19th. I think it's 19th is maybe a Tuesday. This Thursday. See, I've just been working too much. Thank you guys. Anyway, I'm going to put all of these events by noon tomorrow on the website. So if I've completely confused you, I apologize, and I will have another way to check this. Is there anything? Let's see, anything else that I made a mistake on? Boop, boop, boop. July events. Oh, Bridget's going to start, Bridget, who couldn't be here tonight, she had her first treatment last Friday. She did really well the first day. Saturday she felt less well. Sunday she felt horrible. This morning I called her and she goes, I said, I remember, sweetie. I'm so sorry. So she's recovering from that, and but hopes to be up and around and able to take short walks. So she and Heike have decided that they're going to start walking twice a month in July. There'll be a short walk and a long walk, and each one of those walks will start at the Clear Creek Trail. The ones in July, and the following month, whoever's walked with will make a decision about where they want to go the next time. Wow, that's a whole lot of errors. How badly have I confused you? What are the questions? Hi there.
I have a question. There's also that, is this different from the cooking greens class?
The one on the 30th, you're right, is cooking greens. So if it's, I've got the wrong date on this. the one that Vicky's teaching on the 19th, which is, the reason why Vicky gets to be mentioned is because we promote BZIers who are doing volunteer work in the community in the areas of our work. Farm Stop is an awesome place. I'm sure the person that's there on the 30th teaching the other class is it will be awesome, but I don't know her, and I can vouch for Vicky. I've known her a long time, and I know she knows what she's doing. So we promote her because she's in our BZI membership. So did that answer your question? Yeah, she's not looking anymore. I think that's all. I hate to be that wrong, but it just happens sometimes. Okay, so we're going to get this started. You've got a copy of this, right? You do have a question. Hi, how are you?
So last time we met, we talked about chapter 2,
And
intermittent fasting,
we've skipped, haven't we?
and what happened with chapter 3?
It disappeared.
Okay.
It will get back to it. We're going to try to incorporate, there's a couple things we'll have to bring forward into this discussion, but it should have been a 2-3. That was a very short chapter. If you noticed, it was only 4 pages, and anybody who read the fourth one would go, oh, it should have been 2 and 3. So I'll try to do better. I'm wearing too many hats. I think that's all. Any other confusing points? Anything else, Benjamin? Oh, good one. Thanks, buddy. It'll be 5. I think that's a longer one. I haven't looked yet, but I remember it being a longer one, like 15 or 16 pages. Typically, we try not to read too much, keep it under 20 pages, so we don't sound like we're teachers. Did you have another question?
Well, since we didn't really touch on chapter 3 last time, are there any really important points?
Yeah, and Daphne, bless her heart, she read both chapters and she's prepared. She's made some notes so that some of the questions refer to things we haven't talked about yet. And as a result, she's going to bring some of those learning points to you. She wears a professor hat in her day job, so she can do a little two-shoe and get that accomplished. Good point. Thank you for clarifying that. That was my other clarification. Now, would you like to try to make some sense out of this?
So I guess the first question I've got is how many people have read chapter 3 and 4? Okay. How many people have only read chapter 4 and not 3? Okay, so we will go ahead and kind of cover both, but knowing that some folks have had the opportunity to read chapter 3, but others haven't, we'll dig into chapter 3 a little bit deeper so that everybody can kind of get some of the background. So when you look at chapter 3 and chapter 4, really chapter 3 is just setting up the science behind why protein is important that's discussed in chapter 4. So chapter 3 talks a lot about, I won't go into all of the background, you can go back and read, but he sets up the background of how the discoveries were made. But basically, in essence, chapter 3 talks about nutrient pathways that the body processes. So we're all really familiar with insulin being one of the primary nutrient pathways. And when we think about insulin, what do we automatically think about as far as what our body's processing? Sugar or glucose, that's right. So insulin being one of the primary nutrient pathways is predominantly driven by sugar and carbohydrates. Protein does affect it a little bit, but it's predominantly driven by those two. The second nutrient pathway that they talk about is mTOR. And I know we talked a little bit about that in chapter 2, but the difference between mTOR and insulin is that mTOR is only driven by protein. So it is the nutrient pathway that is predominantly driven by protein. So you've got insulin on one side that does carbohydrates and a little bit of protein, but then mTOR where protein is driving most of the nutrient pathway. And then the last pathway that they talk about, and I'm dyslexic, so I'm going to have to make sure I get my letters in the right order, AMPK. And AMPK is really how total calories in general affect the longevity cycle. So while it is a nutrient pathway as far as how the body is processing, it's really talking about total calories consumed. So you can see what they're doing in chapter 3 is they're kind of laying the groundwork for the math of how the body operates. If I add in how many carbohydrates and sugars my body is processing, with regard to insulin, if I add in protein that mTOR is processing, and then I add in fat and total calories with AMPK, now I've got my baseline of all of those pieces that my body will use to figure out how much of that I need and how much I'm in deficit of and how much I maybe have too much of. So that's really what chapter 3 kind of lays the groundwork for. So just to kind of give some broad brushes. So I guess one of the big questions I've got is, for me, chapter 3 was one of those big ahas. It's like, finally now I understand the science behind what's happening in my body and all these news stories I hear about what I should be eating and why I need to pay attention to sugar and glucose. I knew it was important, but the chapter 3 kind of laid out some of the science background. So I'm just curious, for those folks who read chapter 3, what kind of grabbed your attention as surprising or something that was new for you as you looked at it?
I've never heard of mTOR before. It's the first acronym.
Yeah, I mean, it's relatively new. I mean, if you look at how they know when mTOR is really starting to impact the body, it's really not until 2013 and 2016 that they really start to understand how much of an impact it's had. They've laid base level information and how it was impacting other things, but as far as how it relates to insulin and how it relates to AMPK, it's not until 2013 to 2016 that they really understand how it starts to work together. What's interesting for me anyway, when I read through it, is when you understand how all 3 of these work together, all of a sudden you start to realize maybe it's not just about reducing calories, because if I can lower insulin and lower my glucose, we know the benefits associated with that, right? We start to get mitochondrial renewal, we start to get cell renewal, et cetera. Well, the same thing happens with mTOR. If I lower my protein level, I start to get mitochondrial renewal, and it indicates to my body to get rid of the stuff that's old and is starting to deteriorate and kicks off a process to renew. And then the AMPK does the same thing. It's an indicator for when my body needs to clear out all of that negative stuff. So now that they understand how the 3 work together, you start to see that maybe there are other levers we can pull to start that renewal process in our body. Whereas before, I know growing up, it was all about, let's reduce how much sugar I'm eating, let's reduce how much carbohydrates I'm eating, let's reduce how much fat I'm eating because it's not good for my health. Yet what the authors are saying here in chapter 3 is, now that we understand how all 3 work together, maybe the reduction of those things individually isn't what we need to do, and it's not total calorie restriction or fat restriction. Maybe we need to look at what the processes in our body are that mTOR controls, that insulin controls, and that AMPK controls, and are there dietary changes we can make that can start those same processes. So when we move from chapter 3 into chapter 4, they talk specifically about maybe we can use protein to kick some of that off. So in chapter 4, they talk about how too much protein can be just as bad as too much glucose. So I'm curious, when you look at, or when you read through chapter 4, it was surprising to me. It was something I hadn't thought about. Everything that I've been hearing is eat more protein. So I guess my biggest question is, what was your reaction to hearing that protein may not be good if we eat too much of it? And after learning that, what's your next immediate thought? Yeah.
As a diabetic, it made me extremely concerned because I have a pretty high fat, high protein diet, low carb, and I haven't gotten through chapter 4, but just given what I know so far, It's really making me take a really hard look at my diet and what adjustments I might need to make.
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question? We can't speak to that.
Yeah, so the question I had was, it's surprising. Everything we've always heard has been control how much sugar you're eating, control your carbohydrates, control your fat, and then just your overall calories, and you'll be good. Well, the book is saying maybe not. Maybe we need to look at controlling our protein as well. So my question was, what was your initial reaction to that? And I'm sorry, your name was? So Matthew, who's a diabetic, said his first reaction was, oh no, because I've adjusted my diet to be higher protein and to be lower carbs. So now what does this mean? That was exactly my reaction, because I'm coming up on 60 and I'm starting to make all these dietary changes, and everything I was doing was loading up on protein. Well, now it has me stepping back saying, wait a minute, maybe it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Yeah.
I had a question. I'm sorry, I didn't read the chapter. I might address it here, but is it not true that it's not the protein that we eat that makes the protein? Our bodies make protein from the foods that we eat, from the plants that we eat.
So there's both. So they actually do a really good job in the chapter of talking through the bioavailability of protein. So if you eat animal protein, you're taking that protein as it is, and you're using that protein in the form that it's in, and you're taking the amino acids that sit in there and using them directly. If, however, you are using plant-based, your body takes that and extracts some protein out of it, but it's making additional amino acids, and it's using a lesser level of the protein that's bioavailable, which makes your body work for it more. And that's actually one of the arguments in the book, that they say plant protein is better because it forces your body to go through that process. So you're not just taking protein and straight in. Plus, I think if you think about the math, if you're going to have 60 calories or 50 calories in protein, and you eat that in animal protein, that's going to take up this much space, and you're going to get all 50 calories of that protein. If you're going to eat it in plant-based protein, it's going to take up more space, and you're going to get less protein out of that, but it's going to give you more, it's going to fill you up more. So the question becomes, how do you balance the two? And that's really what Chapter 3 talks about, the body mechanics of why we need to look at it. But Chapter 4 talks about we just need to figure out the balance and what's the right balance for us. Yeah.
How do you know, well, up until this last month, my diet's been different this month, but I kind of switched to where I was using mostly plant protein. I'm worried about getting diabetes because all of my family had it. They're all gone, but they all had it. So I am pre-diabetic. So I watch carbs, but sometimes I wonder, am I getting enough? How do you know if you're not getting enough protein? Because I was eating beans,
Yep.
but because a lot of the time I just feel real great. I felt just good.
Right.
And I wondered, I always wondered, am I not getting?
Yeah, so that was great. Does anybody remember in Chapter 4, they actually gave a calculation of how to calculate what's the right protein amount for an average person? Does anybody remember what that?
But they also said to basically, well, it kind of came down to about an average of 1 gram per kilogram of lean muscle.
Yeah, so that's the low number. So the lowest number should be 1 kilogram per lean muscle. So just to step back, lean body weight is your muscle mass, not your full body weight. So if I am 100 pounds, which I'm not, and 25% of that is fat, then 75% of that is my lean mass. So their minimum recommendation was 1 gram per kilogram of lean mass. Their high level recommendation was 1.6. So with the average being at like a 1.2. Yeah.
On the visual scale for that, I always learned that it was the size of a stack of cards. And so whether it was a piece of meat or beef or whether it's fish, it was something I could, like a kilogram, I can't see that, or a gram, or not, I can go like and see it like a card.
Yeah, serving size. So, and that's key because I think it depends on if we're talking animal protein or if we're talking plant protein. So, one serving of beans is going to be a significantly larger size than a serving of fish, but your bioavailability of your protein level is going to be different.
Around protein, and we didn't get into that a lot here in the city, but when I grew up, we always had meat and potatoes and a vegetable every night for dinner. And if a little protein was good, then more protein was better. And so we didn't differentiate between animal protein and vegetable protein. So it was
Right.
just protein is protein, and the more you get, the bigger and smarter you're going to get.
Right. Well, and what the book does a really great job in chapter 3 talking about is that different ages of our life require different protein needs. So the body mechanisms that happen when insulin is high and when mTOR is high and when your AMPK is low, your body is in growth mode. So that's when you're building muscle, you're building size, you're building brain cells, you're building blood cells, etc. For a young person and a young adult, that's the place where we want to be. For a middle-aged or an older adult, that's not where we want to be. Because if we continue to be at that growth size, all we're doing is we're growing in size if we're doing that from a calorie standpoint. But what the book talks about is if we're doing it from a protein standpoint or from a insulin carbohydrate standpoint, we're potentially growing excess things in our body. So one of the things they talk about a little bit later is arterial sclerosis. I can't say it. Basically, the thickening of the arteries. All of us, when we heard all that before, it was always attributed to cholesterol. Well, what they've found now, it's actually an overgrowth of your blood vessel. The muscles of your blood vessel have grown bigger than what they're supposed to be, which are constricting that blood vessel, and that's what's narrowing the artery. It's no longer just cholesterol. That narrowing then catches additional plaque, et cetera. So the argument that they've got here is that growth is not a good thing at different stages in your life. Yes?
I'm especially confused because like the middle-aged people, they don't need as much protein because they're already healthy. But the older people, like my age, over 65, that they don't, sometimes because of being more sedentary, that anabolic resistance where it's just a weird thing.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you once again maybe need more protein than you did in the middle.
Right. So I think you've got to look and talk to your doctor. And what the book has given us are just some very broad brush calculations, which is why they gave us the range of between 1 and 1.6 per kilogram. It's going to depend upon where you are in your health, whether you're in recovery mode. So for example, when Cynthia broke her foot, she needed more protein while she was in recovery mode. I had surgery on my arm last year, and that's what the doctor said, load up on protein and load up on calcium because you've got to rebuild. But now that I'm past that point, I need to go back to a different piece. Yeah.
Can we convert kilograms to pounds and compute it that way?
So I'm not sure I can do the math in my head, but the general rule is pounds are 2.2 pounds to 1 kilogram. So if you think about having 1 kilogram of, what was the number? 1 milligram of protein to 1 kilogram. So for every 2.2 pounds of your lean mass, you're going to want the 1 milligram or 1 gram of protein. So, Yeah, so 1 gram of protein to 1 kilogram of lean mass or to 2.2 pounds of lean mass. So just for those folks who read either both chapters or just chapter 4, when you hear that protein is potentially a risk, the questions that you were just asking are great questions, and they're questions that I think all of us left with, which is, okay, now what? What does that mean for me, and how do I figure out what's right for how I move forward? I think that what the book did a good job of doing in chapter 3 was talking about the process that your body goes through, which is if insulin is high, you're in growth, but if you want to drop insulin down, cutting out sugar, cutting out carbs, or doing a fasting, you can drop your insulin down. They said you can do the same thing with mTOR. So the same process that you lower insulin with fasting and low calorie restriction, you can get the same impacts or the same benefits to mTOR. So what they ended chapter 3 with was really a question which says, can we use other tools like balancing our carbohydrate and protein level or using fasting to be able to kick off those same body processes in order to compensate for the fact that we might be overindulging in glucose or overindulging in protein?
Quick comment. Coming up, next chapter, plant versus animal protein. We're going to learn about the differences, and guess what the next chapter says? 6 is, I had it here just a minute ago, and of course I lost my finger, but we're going to learn that optimal protein in chapter, I believe it's something like that. Anybody can get there before me, let me know. Oh, there it is, the optimal amount of protein. So I think this is critical to what they're trying to teach us in this book. And next, we'll go through chapter 5 next time, and then on to 6, and hopefully we'll have a lot clearer idea then.
Yeah, I think what they've done now is kind of laid the groundwork for us and just kind of given us the broad brushes, and then we get into some of the details there. Yeah.
As I read these chapters, I have all the research I've been reading about protein 2025. Do you think there's been any new research that would cause us to question some of the recommendations they're making in this book? I think there might be, but I don't have the exact answer.
So I don't know. I had the same question. So my background is actually in food as medicine. So for the last few months, I've been doing a ton of research on this protein side because I kept seeing everything come through my newsletters and everything else about the increase in protein. When I started looking at the studies and when I started looking at the articles that were being sent to me, one thing struck me as I was going through it, but it hit me doubly hard when I read this. None of them were age-based. They were just in general. And so I think that when I went back this evening and kind of went back to take a look at a lot of my articles, they were talking to many young adults, young mothers, mothers who are in reproductive periods, and that's where a lot of the article messaging was focused on. It wasn't focused more on middle-aged folks, but I haven't done a full research base. Do you have additional background?
Well, I was just looking up the amount of methionine.
Yeah.
There's really not that much difference between beef and soybeans.
Yes.
To be honest.
Interesting.
And methionine is only a single codon in amino acid. And it's the starting codon of the majority of proteins. There's really not that much methionine. Most proteins are composed of all the other proteins because they're coded by 3 or 4 codons.
Right.
So I'm just questioning that about methionine.
As to why it may be too much, you mean? Or why they focused on having too much of it?
So focus on the difference between plant and animal. I mean, I see that there is a difference, like lentils are way lower than beef, but beef is like 0.7,
Yeah.
0.565 grams per 100 grams, and soybeans is 0.547. Like,
Right.
that's not really that much different to me, so I would be surprised if it was that big.
So I just wondered, does all meat, when you eat it, does it cause acidity, or is it just red meat?
I'm sorry,
I mean, I try to keep my body out, and I know that eating meat, or red meat particularly, that
It's an acid
it throws
load.
into the acidity. But all meats, or is it just red meat?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, if that comes up again, if I'm looking ahead, there's a side-by-side comparison on page 81, which is getting ahead of ourselves here. And you're right, the disadvantages of animal protein in general, they're generalizing, if I read this chart right, is that they have an acid load factor to them.
Yeah, so that must, it's not about how much protein you're eating, it's what kind of protein you're eating.
Yeah, and but I think your comment's right on. It's the same issue that we're having here, which is how much volume. What I'm getting out of chapter 4 is they're laying groundwork, but they're not giving us the details until much later. So we're starting to ask questions as to, well, what does this mean? And I don't think we're getting a lot of it laid out till later. So when I read why is protein bad, the methionine was one piece they talked about, but the other thing they didn't talk about was total calorie load. And so I just assumed it's coming later, and I expect that they'll put all of that together. And my assumption, their recommendation, does anybody remember what the recommendation was as far as how much animal protein versus plant protein? I think it was a 50-50 split, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's moot for people who are vegetarian or vegan. You don't do 50% of animal.
Right. And I think they're
It's 50, it says right here.
Yeah, 50.
50-50.
Yeah, so I think they've taken the approach that they're trying to convince people who are eating a normal Western diet what the expectations are. They do talk about later, as we move forward into some of the other chapters, what amino acids your body needs in order to the 9 essential amino acids that you need to get. And they talk then as far as how you need to supplement if you're not eating meat. So they hit that then.
That's actually exactly what I was just going to ask about, because I've read so many articles about getting all the essential amino acids, but specifically the bioavailability of the protein. For example, I've read over and over again about how eggs are just so wonderfully perfect for your body's digestion. I was wondering if the book gets into that topic.
It talks about eggs. There's a chart in there, and it's a little bit later, that talks about the bioavailability of each of them. And eggs, I think, was like number 2 or number 3 on there.
Mm-hmm.
It does not. I have not gone all the way through the book, but I don't believe that it goes through and gives that same numerical breakout as far as amino acids. What I did find was of the 9 essential amino acids that our body does not make and we need to consume, it does give a list of common foods. And in many of those, eggs, yogurt, beef, and fish were identified as the animal proteins, but they also give a list of plant proteins that can provide the same amino acids.
Yeah, as long as
66.
like for a vegetarian, as long as they can overlap and get all
Right.
of them together, like peanut butter on wheat bread, for
Right.
example, becomes a complete protein.
Right.
Diet for a small planet.
Yeah, there you go. Remember
Right.
that?
You have.
I have, we have,
Combining proteins.
yeah, it's a great book. It's on our shelf and it's really worn out. Looks like it could be cooked by now.
Diet for a Small Planet by Francis.
LaPage? Is it LaPage?
Is it Francis Lamb?
Next, I think it's LaPage, L-A-P-P-E. It's Frisch's
I
friend.
used to cook her all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I know that when it's the same thing, it's recommended like a protein, but like meat and eggs, and fish and nuts and stuff, but those are the ones that have more that she was saying and they're saying that it seemed like to me it said that it's better to kind of restrict that,
Right.
not have as much of that, because then it doesn't keep life from
Right. So one of the things I'm frustrated with the book right now is I want to see numbers. Like I want to know what my target number of that should be, and I haven't found that yet. And my guess is they're not going to provide that to us because it's going to be different for each of us. But they're probably giving us the broad strokes to say there is a relationship between this amino acid and our body's ability to process this other. So it's an inverse relationship. If we keep it lower, our body's better at doing this. And then we're going to have to do some extra work to figure out, well, what does that mean for me? Because it might be different for you. So,
Speaking about each individual, I'm sure the book talks about this, and I haven't found it, but what's the easiest way to calculate your own lean mass?
Ah, Patty.
That's a great question.
That's a good one.
So the question was, what's the best way to calculate your lean mass? There's
Lean.
I had that question today, and I went to Sarah and said I want a body scan to get my fat to muscle mass. And I found out that iHealth bought Sarah, and now they don't do those anymore. So that's the main way to get an accurate assessment, is to get the body scan. But I'm not quite sure where you get them in Bloomington. There must be one.
Or you could do the calipers.
Yep.
Yeah, the pinch
A
test.
lot of your fitness centers will do a caliper test. It's not as accurate, right?
What about those weight scales?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are weight scales that. So if you had used one 10 years ago, the accuracy was not that great. Now they are much better. What they're measuring is they're measuring water content versus, it's just a small current go through, and then based on that water content, they can calculate density. So it is much closer than it used to be. It's better than calipers, but it's not nearly as good as a body scan. But I think what you're using it for here, which is to try to get to what's my protein target, it's going to be in your range. The nice part is that those scales now run $30, $40. So you can pick one up at a CVS or a Target and get home and kind of monitor your own. Is it as accurate as a body scan? No, but it gives you a decent place to start. So I guess the big question I have for each of us is, this is now, for me, what I took away from it is things are getting a lot more complex. I can no longer just watch my sugar and watch my total calories, right? Now I've got to think about protein, et cetera. Based on what we learned in chapter 3 with how mTOR works and how it turns the growth components on in our system, and if we lower it by lowering our protein, we turn those off and give our body a chance to get rid of the old pieces of our cell and go through renewal. Do you feel like you've heard or read enough that making a change in your protein amount is something you're willing to try to figure out? Or do you feel like there's not enough information yet?
Well, I just want to say I stopped eating meat 3 years ago, and I have never really paid attention to my protein at all. I don't eat eggs. I don't eat dairy or processed food or meat, so that limits me a lot. But I get all of it from. I don't feel I'm lacking anything. My body's not. It's not having any symptoms of any deficiencies. But what was I going to say with that?
So I guess the question I'm asking, and I guess it would apply to you, what was it that made you decide to make the change?
COVID. So I didn't want to get COVID, so I wanted to flush out all the toxins from my body and start and like you were talking about the renewal process. So I did a 21-day juice fast, followed by some water fast afterwards. And just to flush everything out, and just to like my immune system, kick into gear and just be, high alert. So that's what really kind of opened my new meal plans. So after I had done that, I wanted to keep my body, having that strong resistance to any pathogens or whatnot. So that's that I doubt about.
I think this is probably not a problem we can solve or get to even a stopping point because it's complex. We have 2 chapters. And so I'll promise you that we'll do some in-depth work. And maybe in the meantime, you guys could think about what your goal is from what you've learned, what you might want to change, and share that with us next time. We will read chapter 5, and there'll be no change to that. And those of you who haven't read 3 yet might want to go back and do a little review. But I think Daphne and her skill with food as medicines has done a good job to make an omelet out of scrambled eggs. Thank you so much. That I'm a cook, right? Okay, in the last 5 minutes, I think we just got about 8 minutes left. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is that we like to promote our tribe members. And one of our tribe members is here tonight who just published a book. And while her book isn't strictly about food, it's about indigenous culture. And I'm only a third of the way through it. It's not even available yet. So yeah, it is just available. Yeah. But I think it was available last week. I did get a copy, and somebody else is using my copy right now, so I'm stuck on page 56, but it was fascinating. I loved it. So I'd like to introduce the author of the book. The book is Power of Spirit. This is Barbara Lance's second book, and I'm going to let her tell you about this and how just a little bit about in the last 5 minutes. And as the good-natured forces of the earth did, my book went away, so I couldn't keep reading, and you saw how far behind I already was this month. So good thing somebody else is reading it right now, but I am going to finish it. Barbara Lantz, L-A-N-T-Z. Barbara, would you like to come up and take Barbara, would you like to come up now?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Barbara Mary Lantz, and why I tell you that is if you want to go on Amazon and just put in Barbara Mary Lantz, and that's L-A-N-T-Z, I'm German, and it'll pop right up. If you try to use the name of it, there's a lot of power and spirit out there, and so it doesn't always pull it right up. But if you put Barbara Mary Lantz, you'll get this. And Cynthia was so sweet. We did a program at the Enright Center last Friday, and she brought her book, and she was passing it around, which was very sweet. And at the end of it, the author finished, and this woman came up to me, and she goes, "Oh, please, may I please buy this book? I'm really into Native Americans." And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I kept thinking, where did she get that book? And anyways, I sold it to her. And then I said, oh my God, I sold her Cynthia's book.
It's a great story.
I didn't mean to do that. But anyways, so I gave her my first book, Soul on Fire. I do historical fiction. This is historical fiction about rock and roll. And this is also on Amazon. Now, it's a different publisher, and I put Barbara M. Lantz, but if you put in Soul on Fire, you'll get it. But is there really? Oh my God. Well, I do want to talk about this one, though, because this is near and dear to my heart. It is a story that I wrote because I saw a movie called I Will Fight No More Forever, which is the story of Chief Joseph. Chief Joseph was a wonderful man. He tried to, negotiate with white people, but as soon as there was gold found in his area, off you go. And they ran because they wanted to keep their freedom. And they were caught 40 miles from the Canadian border, and they were returned to Oklahoma, which was nothing like their climate there in Wallowa County, Oregon. Beautiful place. They call it the Swiss Alps of the United States. So anyways, I didn't like that ending. So I wrote this ending. And I'd like to share with you, just for a few seconds here, I started out this whole thing writing a screenplay that turned into a book, and then it turned into a song. And the song kind of shares the feeling, and I'd like to play it for you right now. And they've hooked me up so that I should be able to do this. What?
Be careful of the cord.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks. All right, here we go.
She plays, sings, and wrote the song.
Oh my God. Ooh. He told him he couldn't live his way, and it broke his heart in a lonely grave. But love is a river that flows through time, and it's heard his cry, an eagle can fly. Fly away. Fly. Fly away. He walked along a trail of tears, waited for over 100 years, a matter of honor from the ashes of lies. Now the debt's repaid, an eagle can fly. Fly away. Fly. Fly away. I will prove the power of the Spirit. I will prove the power of the Spirit. I will prove the power of the Spirit. Of love. I will prove the power of the Spirit. I will prove the power of the Spirit. I will prove the power of the Spirit. Of love. The power of the Spirit. I will prove the power of the Spirit. I will prove the power of the Spirit. Of love. I will prove the power of the Spirit. I will prove the power of the Spirit. I will prove the power of the Spirit. Of love. Ooh, ooh, ooh. An eagle will fly, fly away. An eagle will fly, fly away. Merci beaucoup. If you are interested in that song, in the book, at the very end, Power of Spirit lyrics, and there's a Q code, and so you can go on Sound.
Yeah, it'll take you there.
And that's what I have. And you can listen to it for free. I don't know about downloading and all that kind of stuff because I'm old. But,
Well, she told me after I was asking all those technical questions, she said, I just don't know anything about this. And I said, but you can sing, you can write, you can play music. And I was just telling her, please don't say that. I don't want to hug her too much because I've been sick. But that's going to be all we have time for this week. I promise I won't have a big workshop over the previous week, and we'll do better next time at getting everything more clarified. And I will be sending out a save the date that'll have all the corrections that I interjected into this document. Because they're all right where they're in the original format. I just didn't check. So thank you for being here once again. I really appreciate it. You make a big difference in our ability to stay focused. We're all volunteers, and we give our time to make our community a healthier, happier place. So thanks for participating. Bye.